There's a fight that has erupted over the burial arrangements. Some faction of her family want her to be buried next to her father in Nebi, and the other faction want her to be buried in Adjumani, where she was married. So that's the conflict that is present between her family members. But nevertheless, Stephen Bide is on ground and gives us a better picture of what it's looking like in Parliament as they pay their final respects to the justice. Good morning to you, Stephen.
Yes, good morning to you, Priscilla. Indeed, the feud and concern of where the body of the late Justice Stella Arach Amoko should be buried is still a concern here. Last night there was a meeting between the Speaker of Parliament, that is Right Honourable Among, but still up to now there is no consensus on whether she should be buried in Nebi or Adjumani. And behind me is the casket that is containing the body of the late Justice Amoko, but also some family members also from both sides. Some of them who spend the night here are also seated that side. We are here for the vigil together with some members of Parliament. Of course, we know that the Office of the Speaker made arrangements for refreshments, for food, and entertainment was here to make sure that they keep company for the people who are here for the vigil, of course including members of Parliament. Some ministers were here, but many members of Parliament were paying tribute to the late when the body was lying in state yesterday. For now, one of the people who spoke vividly about the late is Honourable Rose Obiga, who is a woman member of Parliament for Terego, but also when she was speaking yesterday, she talked about how the late inspired her to join law. Honourable, we are here still mourning as a nation for the late justice. But for you, away from what took place, transpired in Parliament yesterday, and up to now, we still don't know where and when we will be burying the late Honourable Justice. First of all, your eulogy to the nation.
Yeah, thank you. I'm Rose Obiga, the woman member of Parliament Terego. It's a dark cloud all over me, and for West Nile and the people of Greater North. We are at least 4 MPs who did not sleep at all, who stayed with the body up to morning. And I want to thank God for giving me that energy, because this was one person who really showed love to me, inspired me, would respond to my messages, would call me, and I met her in the corridors of Arua High Court when she was still a High Court judge, and by then I was a paralegal. We had gone for clerkship, and as a judge passes, you leave way. But she said, "Come, yeah, why don't you do LLB?" The story is long. I'm an orphan, to first look after my siblings and so forth. It's so sad. It's really sad to lose such an icon. There are not many women who rise to this position, especially in West Nile. Honestly, it's heartbreaking. All right. But we give glory to God.
All right.
And rest her soul in peace.
Okay. She's the first late justice I've seen lying in state, but also spending the night here for a vigil. At least we saw the late former Speaker of Parliament, Jacob Olanya, was here, but this one was a former Supreme Court judge. But staying here for the night, even up to now, with this controversy, we don't know what's happening, when and how and why. For you as a member of Parliament who spend the night here, does this concern you? I know negotiations are still ongoing, but does this concern you? Because you never know, you could even spend another night here.
I'm a believer. I trust in God, and I know the truth will prevail. If the truth fails, there is law. And for the day when she is to be buried, where she should be buried, let's give it a little short moment, not long. It will be sorted just by a blink of an eye. When we speak realities, honestly, there is no need to worry. She will definitely lay to rest. I
know you as a human rights activist, a peacemaker and peace lover, but what does this communicate with on issues of harmony within families? What should be done before someone loses a life, but also harmony within families?
Yeah, it's unfortunate she did not give a written will, but not all of us lawyers do a will. But honestly, I just want to believe the night I spent here was not for nothing. That's why I say, at a blink of an eye, it will be done. She will be laid to rest. It's unfortunate that there is this kind of conflict, but it is expected. For a person of her caliber, it is expected. And honestly, the whole situation will be sorted out. I want to say, let relatives stay calm, both parties stay calm, come to their consciousness that what they're doing is not going to help anyone but disturb the soul of my dear sister. But of course, all have reasons, but I think it will be sorted. It is going to be sorted not far from now. We're waiting for the speaker to arrive. The body is not going to remain in parliament. Yeah, it's to lay in state because it's the law that says the body of a judge of her caliber should lay in state, and that's why we are to stay.
Thank you so much, Honorable Rose Obiga, the woman MP for Terego District. Of course, we are still mourning as a nation for the late Justice Stella Arach Omoko, who died on Saturday at the age of 69, short by 1 year before her retirement. That is supposed to be 70 years. And for now, her family, that is the children, are saying that she spoke to some of them and say that she wants to be buried besides her late father in Nebi district, but also the family, the husband's family, that is Ambassador James Amoko. They are saying that she should be buried in Germany, where he hails from. But we shall be keeping tabs and letting you know of what happens here as we continue to mourn the late Justice Stella Arach Amoko. Now I have to hand you back to Priscilla Regina Naroga. She has more information and more guests here to give you more context to what's happening here in our country, Uganda. Back to you, Priscilla Regina.
Well, thank you so much, Stephen Mide. The question now remains, will justice be served to the justice? May her soul rest in peace. Now, back to our topical conversations, focusing on finance and the economy of our country. You look at the 2023-2024 economic transformation blueprint that was laid out to us as the Uganda a whole a few days ago, and now we must have a better understanding of what the decisions, what's the impact of the decisions that were made to bring us into the financial year 2023-2024 at the budget allocation of 52+ trillion Ugandan shillings. That's our Kickstarter focus this morning. Now, Uganda's estimated climate finance needs are $17 to $28 billion during 2020 to 2030. That's a period of 10 years, with an average financing gap of $1.3 to $2.2 billion, and this is on an annual basis. Now, government will need to mobilize private investment to close this particular gap, and the private sector is also financing projects in agriculture, it's financing projects in forestry, it's financing projects in renewable energy, but most is required now more than ever. So Uganda's budget recently projected to 52.7 trillion, and businesses are still not yet in total recovery from the economic wrath throughout the pandemic, the Ebola for us as a country. And the question is, how is Uganda going to manage moving forward? Where is this leading us to as a country? Where are the hopes for a better future? We are joined by the Deputy Secretary to the Treasury, and that is Mr. Patrick Ochealap, to speak to us about the transformational that we are looking at, economic transformation blueprint. Good morning to you, sir.
Good morning. It's always good to be here to discuss issues of economic development, issues driving the policy agenda for this country, to move this country away from a large subsistence economy to a fully commercialized economy, money market economy, and it's very good to be here. The budget for this financial year, as you can see from the theme, is full monetization of Uganda's economy, and there are quite a number of anchors for us to achieve that. Part of the journey started about 3 financial years ago, when the decision was taken to concentrate on looking at the subsistence economy as one of the parts or segments of the economy that has lagged for a long time, and the need to start the journey for transforming that level of subsistence economy towards commercialization. It's not going to be an event. It's going to be a process of a period of time. And as I said, this process started about 3 financial years ago. How did it start about 3 financial years ago? A focus, having identified the segment which is lagging behind, that's the subsistence economy sector, 38% of our households in that area. We decided as a government that a program which is part and parcel of the NDP 3 called the Parish Development Program needed to be put in place with enabling pillars for it to truly transform that segment of the economy into the desirable level of commercialization. Besides that, we are also looking at commercializing agriculture its own right by the large-scale farmers, and quite a number of initiatives are in that area. Besides that, there are a number of other areas in the economy which are going to be tackled by initiatives like such as Emyoga and so on and so forth. So, going back to the issue of transforming our economy from where it is to where we want it to go, and specifically focusing on the budget for next financial year, you clearly see the intentions of government in that area. You mentioned the issue of climate change at the beginning, but I think I'll come back to that slightly later, because it's a whole new area of thinking that requires certainly mobilizing private equity, private capital into that area. But let me go back to the PDM model as one of the anchors that government is using to truly make a change in this economy. That anchor has got 7 pillars, as we now know, and we have had a number of fine-tuning as the process was going on that model in order to make it truly work the way we want it to work. We want all the 7 components to come together and work together. One pillar which has run faster than the rest of the pillars, certainly, is the financial inclusion pillar, where up to 1.1 trillion next financial year is supposed to be put to that effect, following on the heels of the about 1 trillion this current financial year. So that's already 2-point-something trillion going to that area on financial inclusion pillar. We have been refining the implementation arrangements, preparation of the circles, preparation of the parish development committees, preparation of opening accounts, even educating people, letting them know that this is to their benefit. Let them identify the kind of enterprises that they should be able to engage in. And then a stitching time comes in terms of giving them the necessary inputs for them then to apply those inputs into production and generate the output, which they'll use for food security as a first step, but also the excess for the market. Preparing the private sector to be able to uptake off-farm output of the PDM and then be able to add processes to it.
Okay. You have talked about a stitch in time saves 9. We want to also go back to Parliament and find out if a stitch in time is going to save the family conflict that is upon the late Justice Amoko. Stephen Bide has been joined by the Speaker of Parliament, Anita Among, and perhaps she holds the verdict of what is going to be the end of her resting place, or her final resting place being dictated. So, Stephen Bide, what's on ground in that matter?
What's happening now is that the Speaker, Right Honourable Anita Among, has just arrived, and she was the one who was being waited for to make a final decision. That was family members are inside that room where she has entered, and some members of Parliament who are part of the team that is going to be seeing off the late Supreme Court Justice Stella Rach Amoko, and now the meeting they are entering in for is to decide what the verdict, where she should be taken. Is it to Nebi or to Adjumani? And the chopper is just waiting. That is at airstrip Kololo ceremonial grounds, and from here, A+ Funeral Services, who are in charge of this body, together with Uganda Police, the pallbearers will be carrying the casket from this place here in Parliament, where it lied instead from yesterday through the night, where members of Parliament were paying their last respects and tributes on the floor of Parliament. And from here, we shall be knowing where they're going to be taking the body. Is it to the husband's place, that is the ancestral place in Ajumani district, that is Ambassador James Amoko's place, or to her paternal grounds, that is in Nebi, where her late father was buried? And this is just because some members of her family insist that she should be buried just besides her late father, and that was her wish and will, that was verbal to them. But as we know that when you don't make a written will, there are concerns that happen, and that is why there is a meeting that is happening there inside the VIP room of the Speaker's office, where members of Parliament, the Speaker of Parliament, Right Honourable Anita Among, and some members of the family, that is from the paternal and maternal side of the late Justice Stella Arachi Amoko, are enclosed there in a meeting to decide and to make sure they decide on whether they will be taking the body. That side is having some members of the family who spent the night here, together with a few members of Parliament who were here last night for the vigil of the late Stella Arachi Amoko. And these police officers from the Uganda Police Brass Band will be the pallbearers, will be leading the casket to the A+ Funeral Services van that is just parked outside, and that will be driving the body and the close family members to Kolo Airstrip, where the body will be airlifted. And we expect that if she's taken to Nebi, there will be a council meeting where members of the council in Nebi will be paying respect and eulogizing the late Justice Stella Arachi Amoko, who died on Saturday from Nakasero Hospital at the age of 69, and she served the East African Court of Justice, that is in Tanzania. She served the Court of Appeal before being elevated to the Supreme Court judge in Uganda. And this is what's happening here. I'll be updating you later on, Priscilla Regina, on what's happening here, when and where and how the late will be buried. That is what's happening here. Back to you, Priscilla.
Thank you so much, Stephen Bide. Now, as we keep our ears to the ground on what decision will be made in the VIP room, there's decisions that are continuously being made by government here, Mr. Chailap. We were still interrogating the PDM, and while in your presentation so far, it is a good plan, and it's a perfect plan for Ugandans, getting them from subsistence economy to a commercial economy. Nevertheless, let's first interrogate the 1 year plus months that have been of the PDM with the financial inclusion arm alone, minus the other 6 elements of the program. It's already been marked by a lot of corruption, a lot of mishaps here and there, especially in terms of operation, dispensation, in terms of information being given to people. There's been disinformation and information for the recipients of the PDM. How do we intend to actually rectify these moving forward so that in the next financial year there's redemption to the people?
First of all, may the body and the soul of the late Justice rest in peace. Yes, there have been a number of preparatory activities that have been taking place. And this being a new mass program, I'm not surprised there could have been some issues that we didn't see at the beginning that we now see as we go on. It's expected in such a complex program that it will be possible that the things that have happened really were bound to happen. It was a question of time when they would happen. So the most important thing that we need to take care of is that a number of corrective measures have been put in place. They have been refining as we go on. We have been going on with issues of getting the parish committees established, getting them trained, having the people come together and identify the kind of enterprise they want to participate in, the kind of sources of the inputs for the farmers to uptake with respect to the resources that they're going to get with respect to the financial inclusion pillar, and also the grace periods within which they are supposed to repay back, because it's a revolving fund, into the SACCO. So all in all, there are boxes to be ticked. And those refinement of the boxes to be ticked are the ones that where possibly some delays have occurred. Where corrupt tendencies outright have been seen, I think you're all aware of the action that have been taken on all of them. Those guys have been picked up of the system, and we think and believe that the system is the right course for implementation of this PDM. I foresee next financial year, beginning next month, as the beginning of full implementation of the program. But that does not stop us from delivering on the promise.
And when you say full implementation, are the other pillars of the PDM also now going to be given activation?
They have not been sitting idle. We have been trying, but maybe not as highlighted as the pillar on financial inclusion has been highlighted, because I think everything revolving around money, there's a lot of interest around that. But I think the agro-industrialization pillar has been ongoing almost simultaneously, but now we need to now tie it up urgently with the financial inclusion pillar, so that as they withdraw the money out of the SACCOs, they quickly go and pick the improved breeds of animals, improved seeds of the crops, improved activity. They'll be able to link up with the extension services, so that as they pick the resources in order to plant or in order to grow animals and so on and so forth, they are perfectly guided on how to apply them, how to grow the crops, how to maximize the return as a result of application of this money, so that even after the grace period which has been given for the crops and animals for repaying back this money to the financial inclusion pillar, the ecosystem of the production at a household level, not only at a parish, but goes to micro at a household level, is coherently put together along the enterprise that the household has chosen to produce. So it has been going on, but maybe not pronounced. But now is the time to tie up the missing pieces, so that we holistically understand where then is a point of attack for us to address any pitfalls if they occur. But my hope and belief that I think we have done quite a lot in perfecting the financial inclusion pillar in order to avoid, money at times becomes very tempting. So if you miss a point there, then you may risk, the risk is high on the money side than perhaps on the rest of the other pillars. So if we get this money thing fixed very well, I think we have got the right footing on that. And just to finalize the conversation on this point, in terms of the promise that was given to the people per parish, 100 million, that will be disbursed before the end of this month. The balance of the money.
The balance is
the
there?
The balance is there. We've got the money.
It is cashly there?
It's cash there. But I think what they need to know, what everybody out there needs to know, is that until you satisfy those other conditions, tick all the boxes, then you pick the money. Because but the money will not come back.
The challenge is that it will be in transition, and then the financial year closes, it may be withdrawn back to the
That money is not coming back to the consultative fund, I can assure you, from where I sit. That money is not coming back because it's a revolving fund, it's expensed, sent to the SACCO, it will be there.
Okay.
At least let it be in the SACCO, ready for the people to take up as and when they become ready in terms of ticking those boxes and be able to apply these resources for the purpose for which we have sent it there.
All right, thank you for the commitment. Away from the PDM, let's look at sectors. There's a service sector that is most important sector for Uganda's economy. You look at accounts of it to 51% of the total GDP as we speak presently. And the biggest segments within the service are trade as well as repairs. You're looking at 13% in that regard. There's education that caters to 8%. There's real estate that is growing at 5% as we speak. Financial and insurance picking up at 4% in this present financial year. There's agriculture, forestry. I mean, we can't also forget fisheries that are doing very well, accounting for 27%. There's also the industrial sector representation, around 22% of the GDP. Now, mostly of these are also in line line with manufacturing that we have been hearing talk of, the realities are still, a scanty manufacturing 9%. Construction is also a growing sector, 8%. In light of all these, what are the contributions of these sectors in regards to the national economy and in regards to returns, so that later on it is accommodated in the budget?
Right, thank you very much. In terms of what you have summarized the statistics very well, I'm very pleased and happy with your summary of the statistics, and I think you was recently released the composition of the economy, the measured economy and the size of economy, which then we used for forecasting the size of the economy as at the end of this financial year. The contribution by sector, actually, as you have summarized, is very correct. But the good news is that the fastest growing sectors, or the sectors which are growing very fast in terms of services, and in terms of agriculture, forestry, fishing, as well as construction and manufacturing, are actually very, very important sectors to drive the success agenda for sustainable economic development in a transformative manner. Why am I saying so? If you are to get a massive output, say, from the PDM, as we expect as it takes off, you will see that there is need for us to link the output of the PDM production with the processes that are necessary to add value to the output of the PDM.
Yes.
And that speaks to three areas. What kind of services would be necessary, driven by the private sector, in terms of minimizing post-harvest losses to uptake the excess output which is coming to the market from the PDM operations. I'm limiting to PDM because I want to anchor that into that area. What kind of agro-processing industries must be established in the rural growth centers? And this is an action of the private sector. You now see the linkages starting to build up. What kind of requirements do we need to put in terms of marketing this, first within the country, to address the deficient areas in terms of those which will be in famine and require food and need to supply those areas? We should have that real-time information, the trade information systems. And then how much more do we need to add value to our products and start exporting to the region? Because the competitiveness of the economy highly depends on the ability of the economy to export to the region and the world at large. And good enough, if you listen to the minister's speech very well, for the first time in almost very many years in the past, we are starting to export manufactured goods to the region. And that's a very good plus, because if then the output of the PDM is linked through the system that I've described briefly along the lines of value chain, add value to make the price a bit better for those who are dealing the trade within the region to export finished goods, not raw materials, to the region, then that is a very good trend in terms of sustainable incomes for the people who are producing and supplying these inputs into the value chain, and also the manufacturers themselves, because I'm happy manufacturing is growing, and that's a fact. That is where the hope and the life of the economy is going to hinge on. Ensure that we do manufacture, add value in line with the standards for competitive exports in the region, and diversify our export base. That is where the life of the economy will sustainably be coming through. And which is why the allocations, if you relate them to these areas, are aimed at that. Right from PDM, you go to agro-industrialization, it's about 1.8 trillion shillings there. You go to the need for us to capture that small middle, the Myoga group, which are the various trends, which in their own way add to the support that's necessary as a backward linkage with production at the lower level, but also intermediate level to supply the intermediate goods into the next level of production, which is why we are considering under UDB with more money there and UDC with more money there to be able to deal with commercial agriculture then. So there is a whole coordinated approach to the production in this economy not only production in the economy, but value addition in the economy.
Okay.
Not only that, but also trying to get into the higher end of the value chain and earn returns.
Nevertheless, the country is worried. Where is the money going to be coming from to cater to the entire next financial year? And there's also the big debate on the public debt that Uganda has as a country. All those questions are going to be answered when we return from this break.
You're watching Morning at NTV.
Jafford, 2 seconds. The step back for the win. I'm a three. Yeah, it's a big. Yeah. Oh yeah. I'm a three. It's a big. Get the ballin' bucket for only $77,000. NBA, KFC, balling all day.
The drilling of development and production wells for the Kingfisher project in Kikube district started in January 2023, while the delivery and assembly of the 3 drilling rigs for the Tilenga project is ongoing. Enabling infrastructure works for the other required facilities, including the central processing facilities, well pads, flow lines and camps, remain on course. The produced resources will be commercialized via the East Africa crude oil pipeline, which will run from Uganda to Tanzania, and the 60,000 barrels of oil per day Uganda refinery project, which will be constructed in Hoima. These projects are bringing investment of $15 billion into the country. The Petroleum Authority of Uganda, creating lasting value in Uganda's oil journey.
Some say we are the biggest show.
Baddest teen show ever, and that's Teen Nation.
The biggest teen show at Teen Nation.
Others say we are definitely the biggest show.
Teen Nation, Uganda, and that's it.
Teen Nation. Teen Nation.
Full teens of this century.
Palmer like it, and yes, we're gonna rock to the fullest.
What show has events that hold cities? Conversations that educate and change futures.
It's from this school that I've picked up so many skills.
And the practical part is the best part of it.
Promote your talent. You cannot tell with your hand.
Today is a party that we're gonna fill up.
Movies that drive you straight to the cinema. We do this every single Saturday throughout the year. This is no ordinary show. This is NTV International. With me, Pam Malaika.
On the next episode
is brought to you by Rock Boom. Feel the positive energy.
On the next episode.
You're so arrogant! That's enough! Stop it, please. I'll go with you, Ma'am Ruth, and I'll talk to Jacob.
But Grace, all right, just let us go with you.
No need for that, Dad. I need to talk to Jacob alone.
Grace, are you sure about this? Just tell us to go with you, and we'll do it for you.
I can do this by myself, Mom.
Don't let them hurt you.
Rock Boom, now in a new bottle with the same taste and same positive energy. Available in a 320 ml PET bottle. Rock Boom, feel the positive energy.
You're watching Morning at NTV.
Mr. Ochailap Patrick, Deputy Secretary to the Treasury, and myself, Priscilla Regina Nalwaga, looking on to 2023-2024 Economic Transformation Blueprint. And so far, I believe that he has done a good job in dispensing. But the question is, where is the money going to come from, Mr. Ochailap? Looking at the domestic revenues for the financial year that is projected, you're looking to 29.7 trillion, of which 27.4 trillion is going to be a tax revenue, and then the 2.3 billion non-tax revenue. This is representing a whole revenue effort of 14.3% of the GDP. Where is Uganda going to be getting the revenue to cater to the next financial year?
Thank you very much. I will summarize the source of revenue in terms of the domestic revenue. It's indeed 29.7%, of which I think, which is about 53 point something percent of the total effort for financing the budget. The other components of the financing the budget certainly is what we normally say, what's the size of the fiscal deficit in order to cover the gap between your planned expenditures and your revenue collection. As you can see, expenditures are 52 trillion, and then we're going to collect 29.7 trillion, which is about 53%, as I said. Now, how do we finance the difference of the 52 trillion and the 29 trillion? There are other areas that we're looking at. Certainly, there is small domestic borrowing. You may be pleased to know that we have been a little bit high on domestic borrowing. The other year, we picked at around about close to 7. This current financial year come to an end. It was programmed to be about 5 trillion. Next financial year, we're coming down to about 3 trillion. It's still high, but it shows the intent of the fiscal policy in terms of reducing our dependency on domestic borrowing as part of the financing. Linked to that, we're also trying to look at areas. There's going to be some financing, largely concessional terms, from the multilateral agencies, the World Bank, African Development Bank, Islamic Development Bank, and so on and so forth, which is about 8 trillion. So you can see I'm adding up my numbers to my 52. The bigger part of it also is where we, because of accumulation of debt in the past, which we are trying to now slow the speed, we are going to borrow in order to finance the maturing debt. Okay. You call it domestic refinancing, about 8 trillion. So between them and external financing, about 16% of the financing of the budget. And then there are smaller residual issues that we're going to look for money for capitalizing Bank of Uganda, about 217 billion. That's Bank of Uganda issuing instruments in order to capitalize itself. And that too is part of the numbers that we're talking about. So the structure, that's the structure of the financing of the budget. Now, the hard question that you asked is, where does URA get this money? I think we've been going through the discussions on how we think URA is going to raise these resources without raising taxes. That's a very important point. This is the third year running that we're not raising taxes. And then, how do you expect to get the money? One, the bigger part of the increases in revenue collection is really as a result of the buoyancy of the economy. As the economy grows, manufacturing grows, the consumption taxes grow, and therefore we should be able to, as a result of buoyancy of the economy alone, to be able to get, it's growing at about 1 trillion per annum, that buoyancy effect. But most importantly, the one which is more durable is the issue about systems in URA and the efficiency of URA to collect the taxes at the current rates. There is a huge gap between, I think, the approaches that have been used in the past, between what we are collecting from those that have been assessed to pay taxes and the reality of how much we collect, because of lack of information about even the taxpayers that we are dealing with in the various categories.
There's the fact that the bigger market players and private investors are given incentives that could have actually done us justice if they could pay their taxes duly.
Yeah, incentives are not bad, but we need to watch out for incentives. I agree with you entirely. And actually, in this next year's budget, we have started a journey of rationalizing those incentives with a hard look at what is it that we have given these investors, and what are they doing with the incentives? Are they actually ticking the boxes of what they say they are going to do? If you say they are going to employ 200 people, not people carrying materials in the factory, no. That's a low-end area. Those are necessary also. But real people who have some good income that they are earning, which ends up as a take-home back home, and high-value employment levels. Are you giving them, as you said, in your incentive regime? What's the impact of those incentives on the economy once the person has invested that amount of money? So the tax rationalization actions are actually starting to yield the fruit.
And
part of the numbers.
Will they be able to then revoke some of these incentives just in case they don't
we're putting in place what they call sunset clauses. That if you don't do this, then I think the sun sets on you, and such incentives come to stop. And part of the revenue forecast from URA for next financial year actually took into account some of those tax rationalization inputs, what you expect to get as a result of setting in place those sunset clauses. Part of the tax procedures amendments that took place this financial year equally are meant to help URA do that. But most importantly is empowering URA to use systems, IT systems, integrating your rental houses, say, with the water bills, which are in your names. There's no way you can say that the rentals which you have built are not yours, but for somebody else, or else then the income goes to the other person and it becomes assessed. Linking that with your UMEME bills, for example, linking that with how much you are emitting in terms of NSSF contributions to the other people. When you say that you're employing 200 people, but you're emitting less than what the 200 people would otherwise ordinarily remit in terms of what you are paying them. So integrating these systems together will give you a higher, superior level to know the taxpayers, to calculate accurately how much they are supposed to be collected from such areas, and also to be able to quickly audit using the audit systems for them to get it. IFRIS is the other one. If they can link up all the supermarkets in this country into the IFRIS system, or the electronic receipting system, you find that there is quite a lot of revenue, which has been going out there. Most supermarkets currently use calculators. You pay 300,000, you go. You're happy I've got the goods, but I'm not happy because I'm not collecting revenue on the goods that you're supposed to have paid for. So there's a lot of that out there. So, and I at times stop in supermarkets occasionally, and you get the receipt. It's printed, I read down there, I see how much I've earned in terms of URA, and that's real-time transfer to URA.
Okay. Mr. Tailap, in conclusion, government priorities for the next financial year. I know that PDM is top priority. Climate change, I know, should also be there. It's eminent to have a conversation about it.
Yes, we have started with the conversation in the recently concluded African Development Bank annual meetings in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt. That was the theme of the annual meeting for us. I did participate in it. And the issue is that climate change adaptation is a thing that will help us even sustain what we're doing with a PDM, because if it's anchored on agriculture and there's a vagary of climate, there's drought. I saw a country recently that there's some little drought cropping in, but we pray that it goes away quickly and we make a big harvest. There is need for us to work together. We have created a climate change unit in the Ministry of Climate Financing Unit in the Ministry of Finance, and the unit is doing very well. We have set up the basic parameters on which we need to engage with multilateral and bilateral financing institutions and the private sector. There is no way we can succeed in mobilizing that amount of money without that coordinated approach for investments in the climate change area. And what are these investments? Irrigation. In our small way, if you look at the budget, there's some money for water for solar-powered irrigation systems, at least at the parish level, starting with water-stressed areas. There's some sizable amount of money there. I think it's about 200 billion Uganda shillings in this budget that we're talking about for next financial year. It has always been there, but growing. Things like that are the ones that will help the farmers to deal with all year round production. When rain becomes deficient, you should be able to use solar-powered irrigation systems to be able to generate some income out of production from the ground. So engagements are going to be heightened between my ministry and the private sector players in irrigation, in alternative sources of energy to mitigate against the effects of deforestation, and so on and so forth. It's not going to be a simple engagement because there are high stakes of the high big boys. And even the so-called carbon credits, if people are to rush there, they are kind of priced cheaply by those guys because they know they want to make a kill. They want you to grow the forest in the whole of Uganda in order to get maybe less than $1 billion. And they say carbon credit. So we have to be very, very tactful and competent enough to be able to engage them and engage the private sector in this climate change agenda.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Patrick Ochaila, for engaging us and enlightening us on the prospects of the financial year 2023-2024. Looking forward to some of these things becoming realistic. We also do have Ivan Kewalunyolo, who is on ground in Abaita Babiri, that is in Entebbe, and he's going to be talking to us about